Hello and welcome to this month's edition of ECGrid Presents. For those new to us, Loren Data ECGrid is a leading provider of B2B connectivity through cloud-based EDI solutions and unmatched customer support. My name is Linda Moore, and I'm your host of ECGrid Presents. Our guest this month is Loren Data ECGrid's Chief Product and Operating Officer, Jon Gatrell. Jon is known for bridging the gap between technical execution and market needs. We can all agree EDI is ever evolving between APIs, cloud platforms, real-time data, and now AI. The old way of doing B2B integration is getting serious upgrades. Jon will be breaking down what that shift really looks like and why it matters. As always, we welcome your questions during the presentation, so please type them right into the Q&A. The session is being recorded, and all attendees will receive a copy by email. And now, Jon, over to you.
Thank you for the introduction, Linda. I look forward to having an interesting discussion on some trends we see in our space around using APIs, leveraging AI, and driving a future for EDI, which represents smarter connections. And for many of us that are probably on this webinar, we've seen technology promises that are put in the market or put into the media that have never materialized. We've seen some that have fundamentally changed the market, changed our implementations. And so I thought I would kind of step back in time a little bit and share a Gartner hype cycle from 2001. And what the Gartner hype cycle does is it looks at certain types of technology as they emerge in terms of how visible they are to participants to the market and how mature they are from an implementation. And the one I'd like to really call out on this particular hype cycle is web services. So this is 2001, and Gartner is saying web services are going to be highly productive in 2 to 5 years. Now, we are actively deploying web services in many of our implementations. There's great benefit today, but I would argue that it wasn't 2 to 5 years. Most organizations didn't aggressively deploy point-to-point technologies for web services until 2014, 2015, or a decade ago, or more than a decade from publication of this hype cycle. And a hype cycle as a construct really is a way for us to look at technology as it matures. And, the first part of bringing new technologies to market is pure R&D, coming up with potential ways to use technology in a different way, and then investing in it. And then deploying that technology, maybe as a startup, and finding ways to leverage that in a business perspective to develop new categories or change the way organizations do business. And so early on, you get the startup frenzy. You get really a set of tool sets that organizations can choose to deploy based on their understanding and then really their own intellectual property. And then as it emerges in the marketplace, those early adopters start gaining traction with the technology and successfully implementing it. And then at the peak of inflated expectations, if it's lucky enough as a technology to meet that point in the marketplace, it starts transitioning to other members of the marketplace adopting. In fact, in many ways, this is a different rendering of technology adoption lifecycle that was made popular by Geoffrey Moore. And so that activity beyond early adopters is ultimately when it crosses the chasm and starts getting more mainstream adoption. But this document or this graphic is there's a lot going on. And for me, there's a way to simplify this. If you think about the market in 3 chunks as technology is deployed, there are early adopters or pioneers in a technology space. And if we think about the word pioneers and maybe look through history, pioneers go places other people won't. They're braver, they take greater risk. And very often, those new places they go, they have to build their own way forward, their own infrastructure, their own roads, their own housing, and the like. And so, early markets for pioneers are tool sets, are things that you configure and things that you deploy in a custom way. But as that market crosses the chasm and you go beyond those early adopters, that's when different people enter the market, and I'll call them settlers. Someone's gone out into the wilderness, they found a valid place to settle down, and when technology crosses the chasm, it is no longer viable to have tool sets. They want proven solutions because these folks are not crazy people. They aren't going out and forging their own. They want to know something is safe. And so how we manage those products, how we invest in those products, and how we adopt those products are different. New technology and innovation is no different. As markets continue to evolve, as technologies continue to mature, once you enter that sort of mass adoption phase, that's where you start seeing consolidation of vendors. That's where you start seeing roll-ups for big brands. In fact, when it enters that third phase, I sometimes refer to those folks as sheep. They didn't want to go there early. They are more of a laggard decision maker. And so these sheep, when they go to these new technologies, as they become productive on that plateau of productivity that you see on the right side of this slide from Gartner, they want to go to brands they can trust, quality service, continuous innovation, the ability to, in many ways, just trust the story that the market has created as this technology has been adopted. And so when I look at the future of EDI, technologies come and go. EDI is going to get killed by XML was a mantra at the turn of the millennia. It didn't. But it did give us some opportunities to tinker and pilot and augment our historical EDI implementations. In fact, I want to reframe EDI from thinking of it as a standard, legacy standards of X12 and Edifact, to think of it more as exchanging data. It's electronic data interchange. So it can be JSON, it can be web services, it can be AS2 for communications, it can be XML, or it could be the traditional and proven technology that you see with X12 or Edifact. And so if we think about those two last items in our implementations, it's gotten to a place that in many ways we don't even notice it. And if we think about what Bill Gates says here, the advance of technology is based on making it fit in. So you don't really know it exists. It just becomes an everyday part of life. And so innovation is a cycle. And not everything that's a great idea ultimately gets successful in the market. Now, we've learned lessons from those technologies. We've maybe changed our implementations, but innovation has two components. I mean, true disruptive innovation, not incremental innovation that every single one of us are doing today in our IT organizations and our software platforms and the like. But the two things disruptive innovation has to do is it has to create a belief that this technology can ultimately do something different in a way that gives our business an ROI, different in a way that it tightens our supply chain, different in a way that the second item, it changes our behaviors, how we look at our investments, how we analyze success or failure of an implementation. And so this cycle of innovation is constantly out there. And if we look at innovation, when is the right time to step in? And for some of us, we're early adopters. Others are more laggards or sheep. But there are some common realities that we all have in our supply chains today. And so I'm going to work through what I think is one of the most critical items we need to think about when we work with our business partners, our platform providers, our trading partners, our resellers, our folks building solutions on our products or running their business. And at the center of a successful supply chain is trust. And that seems minimalist in some ways or a given. But when you look at trust, first as individuals, we've got to provide the confidence, the credibility that when we work with a business partner, when we work with a trading partner, someone buying our products, that we can build the confidence and credibility that when we say we're going to do something, we actually do that. In fact, that individual interpersonal trust is built through direct and continuous interaction with the key stakeholders that we've got to engender that trust for and with. And then institutional, we move back from what people say and what they do. How does your organization, how does your team, how does your business relationships create structures, create systems of interaction, and create modes of interaction that really drives confidence around the systemic reliability of your organization and your deployments. And if we do what we say we're going to do, we implement something that meets the business requirements of our organization, meets compliance and legal requirements of our partners, that's where we develop a reputation. Now, that reputation over time is critical. And the interesting thing about reputational trust is it can be destroyed like that. You can have a outage in your platform. You could have issues with skills availability to cover an issue that's going on in production. And so once you know that there's 3 layers of trust, the things that we do and say we're going to do as people, that we put together plans and systems that bolster that confidence, not just in what we say, but in what our whole organization does, then we'll have a reputation that enables us to more tightly couple our relationships, to have direct access to a platform with an API versus using some legacy protocols or connections. And so trust is central to success in any supply chain, in any business relationship. Now, to create trust at the systemic, at the institutional level, that's where we have third-party, I don't call them rating systems like on Amazon, but there is a role in certifying and auditing with a third-party external resource that says not only did they say they do things one way, they actually do those things. With SOC 2 audits, ISO audits, and maintaining transparency and what worked and didn't work is also critical. And being honest about those things that didn't work. And so as we think about deploying new technology, we're going to have successes and failures. And so as much as we want to scream the success, we all should be introspective and transparent enough to not just whisper the failures, because everyone that we work with can learn from those failures. But if we've got the right trust to maintain it over time, that gives us an opportunity to increase the quality of our data, the timeliness of our data, the ability to deploy technologies and capabilities that hit and exceed the service levels for your internal stakeholders, but those external business partners, such as supplier forecasts, supplier ratings. And I guess if we talk about ratings and suppliers, I guess we can't ignore the dynamic in most organizations or most business relationships. There's some sort of power dynamic that exists. And sometimes that power dynamic comes from a buyer, says, thou shalt do X, thou will do that. But there's also compliance issues with governments, industry best practices. One of our best business partners and most strategic folks we work with, they represent an industry as a consortium. And as a consortium, they look at their requirements slightly different than an end user because they're representing an amalgamation, if you will, of vendors and suppliers that have common needs and goals. And so we aren't just influenced by the people we do business with. There's also third party influences that could be industry based, could be government based. And I mean, we certainly have had some challenges around tariffs and those kinds of things that have caused lots of us to look at our business differently, as well to look at our trading relationships and supply chains differently. And so if we're going to think about deploying technology, because technology has risk, right? Innovation in itself isn't just behaviors and beliefs, it's also risk. And if we're going to walk down a path that has risk with our partners to deploy new technologies, then we have to have trust and continue to build on that trust across all three layers as people, as businesses, and for our global reputation. And so if we adopt that as a baseline, then we have an opportunity to start looking at what we're going to build now and what we should build beyond today. Have that strategic view of what we're going to do next. And maybe not just strategic, but an introspective view that says we might do things that won't work. But as we do those things that don't work, how do we recover for it? How do we learn from it? And so how do we really be a resilient organization that provides the right redundancy, the right capabilities? And when we think about supply chains, dual sourcing has been a topic for a very long time, but there's also important around dual capabilities in your supply chain that might be multiple vendors or multiple technologies that are deployed. In fact, I'll talk about analytics and alerts. We provide a series of APIs that some of our customers leverage for error management and handling. Some of them actually have put us in their network operations center. You walk into their offices and we can see live data from our network ECGrid moving across. And then as errors might happen with bad content or the service isn't available at your trading partner, you can more rapidly respond. But that's not the only place to get that content, right? You have to have some resiliency. If you're using AS2, that endpoint has alerts and errors you can manage. So you need to think about what are those points that you can leverage to have the best view of your data, and what's the way that you can integrate them strategically to improve your implementation, but most importantly, to improve your execution against commitments, execution against business goals. And so Bossity tells us that execution in and of itself is the ability to match strategy and reality. And sometimes your strategy is not dead on because there's things that might happen in reality that will allow us to continuously and in an ongoing fashion align our teams, our people, our technology to achieve the goals promised. And so strategy is the start of it, having the right trust, and then putting together a plan based on the belief that your strategy will succeed as you put out into the market and your implementation, a modernization of your implementation. And this is a great discussion to have. APIs are a great resource for you to have real-time event-driven capabilities that you just don't get today in your batch implementations. If you're directly integrating with the machine and have interactive dialogue, if you will, around the health, around the status, around the volume, then you can build trust with your team, but also trust in your deployment that you'll have the right information you need at the right time to ultimately make decisions. And so I really believe APIs give us that next level of redundancy and resiliency that augment for different parts of our business the right information they need to do their jobs, whether it's a NOC monitor for your network operations and infrastructure teams, whether it's your EDI coordinators going through our portal to track a document. Those different interactions or different methods may be required relative to people's roles. And you may need different business events and be able to support different business events with different types of technology, because many of us today are still batch. In fact, the supply chain today, while AS2 is our recommendation and web services our go forward investigation model and core to our architecture, there's lots of people still using FTP. And some of those legacy capabilities makes it hard to reconcile in real time, but also doesn't provide you the agility to make the right decisions to avoid any business risk or impact. So APIs are the start of that agility and that resiliency to create production level mechanisms to ensure trust in your institution and your brands. And so let's talk about how APIs can not just improve our processes, but they can improve our auditability with SIEM implementations, log file and error management capabilities. But the basic one that I think is a big bonus is data quality. If you're using a prescribed, tight, fine-grained API like we have in our ECGrid platform, we actually call it ECGrid OS. There's a form factor of the content. There's constraints in that content, and it can create effectively like a data quality firewall for your supply chain and allow you to react very quickly as the events might require it. And so I want you to start thinking about APIs as not just a way to interaction, but a way to enforce and govern your processes and your data to ensure the right data is in your system and you're not just proliferating bad data. And so if we think about modernizing through APIs around events and data, then that gives us the power. It gives us the control to dial things differently for one trading partner than another trading partner. It allows us to open up systems. Many legacy VAN providers in our space just haven't created the right infrastructure to allow for API integration. They become gatekeepers of a closed system using batch. A lot of VANs are still requiring FTP for connectivity. They aren't using modern technologies such as AS2. And so that means a delay in understanding, a delay in delivery, a delay potentially in the quality and security of your implementation. And so APIs give us that way to open it up and then redefine and control our implementation. And if we have that control and we have those capabilities, now we can get flexible with our deployment. In fact, a hybrid model is probably the most common deployment we see in our customer base, because why would you rip out millions of dollars of EDI, legacy formats like X12, and just reinvent the wheel? But you might find a new business process, forecast or planning. You might have returns automation. You might have warranty and repairs activities that you could manage through a JSON API implementation. And so what we see with the emergence of APIs and new data content configurations is a complementary approach to deploying these technologies versus rip and replace. And so hopefully I provided a pretty good baseline of how trust is central to success as you deploy new technologies. how APIs can get you the right data and improve the data quality across your business processes, whether they're just internal or a shared process with your business partners. And so those are the conceptual kind of strategic elements. But before we move forward, Linda, are there any questions right now? And I think I probably want to drink real quick as well.
We do have an API question, John. So here goes. I've always known EDI to be real time, and now we're seeing real time associated with APIs. So do APIs improve upon traditional EDI's real time, or was it not actually real time until now?
Yeah, well, I've been a marketer saying real time for a long time, so I got to be careful here. Ultimately, EDI today, at best, in many implementations, is event driven. And so you receive a file, you store it, you forward it, and maybe you forward it to a third party network. And a lot of those connections are over the wall and again batch. Even in AS2, they might have gotten the mailbag, but they've got a batch process for processing the data. Even though all of our data on our network is fully processed, fully parsed, and delivered to the endpoint sub-second, not a lot of solution providers are out there. And I would say there are customers on our network today using FTP. FTP, maybe very fast batches, but it requires them, and I'm going to use the wrong word, but to dial into the mailbox, get the data, come back, pull it, versus pushing data. I mean, so AS2 moves us closer to it if everyone has that capability because it's event driven. APIs get us there, at least as we think in terms of error management, a direct back office integration, and ensuring data compliance and integrity. So we've been really good at improving speed of delivery as an industry. And I think lots of folks are catching up now to where we are. And I'm excited about what we can offer with our API first architecture on ECGrid. Some customers are building their own alerts and monitoring apps, own UIs. With our Simplify product, we're seeing direct application integration. Someone creates an PO and SAP in the cloud, it comes immediately out and gets to the trading partner over AS2 in sub 30 seconds once the order is processed out of SAP. So we are accelerating the supply chain, and that has continued to happen over time. But I think we're getting closer now to that real time direct integration model that has been promised for so long. Was that any other questions, or was that it right now?
That's good right now. Thanks, John.
All right. So we talked about technology goes through phases, and not all technology wins because innovation is risky. Early adopters may not actually move forward with the technology after they piloted it. But API is, as a construct, web services as a delivery or connectivity option is very mature and is increasingly becoming a mode of implementation in our customer base and across the market. And so APIs, and I think we've talked a little bit about this, they really provide us the ability to see things now, get a file now, see the status of the file, get the metadata of what kind of content it is, who is the content from, when did we receive it, when did you download it. In fact, transparency around managing data and using APIs is one of the biggest benefits. Because over time, if you get more data on how your data moves, that's when you can start leveraging the power of AI. And I haven't gotten to AI yet, but I believe APIs are the starting point. You need to be able to collect significantly more data and then use that data over time to automate and leverage AI in an effective way. And so instant access to your data is the starting point, but also that metadata around it is an important part. So we need to know what's actually happening in real time and in a very transparent way. And APIs are really purpose built to collect ancillary metadata, but also address real-time activities. And if we've got that transparency in our implementation and the extended data that we can use, in fact, I want to talk about another customer of ours that is doing some really interesting things around transaction lifecycle management. Like they send a PO, an ASN, and invoice. And then as they move through that life cycle, they can put business rules on top of it. Did they respond quick enough? Or are they at risk of missing a service level agreement around an ASN or shipping the product? APIs are providing the right data today to implement those kinds of business level process enforcement capabilities and making it transparent to business users as well as technologists that may need to take action. But the other interesting thing that APIs can provide is it can level the field from smaller organizations to larger organizations. The time of the technology advantage being relegated to only those folks that had large IT shops or billion-dollar brands, these small codes today, because implementing APIs is pretty lightweight. You can use higher level languages to implement them. In fact, many vendors that have APIs on their platforms include sample code that they can use, like templated code. And so if you are a smaller organization and you want to build that trust, not that you're just compliant, but that you're the right supplier to scale with, APIs can be that balancing effect because they're not hard to implement and you can incrementally invest in them over time. And when you have that access and trust, in some ways to your systems and processes, you all look the same. And so it's just a matter of who meets the needs of that buyer's business requirements better. So APIs are in many ways an egalitarian technology that can allow many small organizations look or play like larger organizations that your buyers do business with. And it also helps in preserve information integrity at scale. So as you deploy these, I talked a little bit about theoretical data quality firewall. But as you scale, as you learn, in fact, maybe sometimes as you fail, part of that scaling process doesn't just tighten your technology, it tightens your operations, it tightens your implementation and your supply chain relationships. Because if you got better visibility, you're hitting their business requirements, you're compliant with law and industry trends, and you're doing it in a way that doesn't create a burden on your buyers, then as you scale, you don't just have information integrity, you have process integrity. And organizations have shared processes, and that may be one way to think of it. There's things you do in your business that are private, your back office. You build processes and governance around it. And then as you go out into the B2B space, you move from private processes to public processes. And those shared processes may scale in one trading relationship different than another. It may scale differently in terms of frequency of ordering if they're using multi-channel commerce and they expect you to drop ship. And so APIs, regardless of the channel, regardless of the volume, can give you that consistency and interaction and that commonality of data that allows you to react if errors are coming up, if you're running low on stock on Shopify. In fact, we have lots of customers today on our Simplify product that are working with marketplaces. Walmart Direct, I think, and Shopify, Amazon, and they have to maintain inventory for each of those channels. However, they use APIs to distribute and manage that via our simplified product. And so you have one inventory that you allocate across multiple channels, and you need to be able to update it in real time. If one channel goes empty, you've got to redistribute with inventory advices. And so APIs give you the ability to kind of segment your view of your world and address the needs as they change in different segments. So that's an exciting part about APIs. And well, literally what it means, I guess, is it's adaptive, right? You can adapt your processes dynamically. You can adapt your systems dynamically. You can adapt your business needs, inventory, carrying costs. You can change your business models. And cloud, actually, we haven't talked about cloud technologies, but the wonderful thing about cloud is you get the baked-in redundancy, the DR capabilities. You get a resiliency and a tracking capability in many of the platforms like Azure that allow you a great deal of flexibility as you connect different entities, different systems, different suppliers, and then you can look at kind of whole cloth. What is the demand for your products? I mean, you don't want to run out of product. You don't want to misallocate inventory, and so having a centralized API implementation really gives you a way to see all that data. And it's the data that matters. It's the data that gets you to the value of AI. And so we haven't talked about AI, but we've got the right trust in our supply chain. We're doing the work around and augmenting and extending our heritage EDI with complementary XML and JSON. Now we're in AS2 and web services. We've got all kinds of data. We got redundancy and monitoring. Now we've got enough data that potentially we can train an AI. And that's a weird phrase. Some of you might not be familiar with that. So let me try and explain it. If you've ever used Chat GPT, those are called large language models. And it's the easiest one because I think lots of us are using it. Similar things, Grok maybe, or Gemini and some other ones that are out there. But basically what large language models are is they look at a bunch of data. They suck a lot of data in, and then they use that data to answer prompts when you ask it questions. But its ability to answer your questions or deliver value is predicated on what the data was it was trained in. And so what we see now in AI is we see vertical models being developed. We're seeing business-specific models being developed. But the ability to train an AI requires that you have content, and that content has enough edge cases, has enough normative activities, has enough provisioning activities that you can ultimately start using that data to make better decisions, to predict the future, to better manage inventory, to figure out errors in your processes between ERP and warehouse management and how that might flow down into your supply chain. And so ultimately, AI can improve operations by having more detailed information around errors that happen, things that go well, just like you can learn from things that work as well as you can that things that don't work, because that creates a norm. It creates, this is the pattern of how you operate. One of the benefits right now, and that we're working on in our organization, is detecting anomalies. As you know, we have some of the longest data retention for our customers. We do the same thing for our systems and our operations too. And we have a historical view of how our platform operates. And so we are now putting in set of infrastructure and tools around alert and monitoring that will allow us to deploy an AI to do proactive anomaly identification. So it's almost crazy in some levels what we're seeing in our initial returns. If trading partner A always sends data on our platform on Sundays at 10 p.m., but they haven't sent that data on Sunday at 10 p.m. by midnight, let's say, local time, we can generate an error and let them know, is everything okay in your back office? We can look at our system throughput. Have we gone beyond 0.6 of a second in moving a piece of data? Is that a emerging trend, or is it an anomaly that requires action? So we can create alerts on that. But it's that data from your APIs as well as your trading content that really gives the glue or the insight that allows AI to do their job. And the next thing it does, AI, and this goes not unlike APIs. APIs level the trading field, the playing field with larger companies, but it flattens the power imbalances. The benefits that large corporations get out of a large language model, the same ones that you can get. Now, maybe they're not at the same scale, but you can automate, you can learn, you can do queries. One of our customers has created a AI infrastructure. In that infrastructure, they're asking folks like us and their other business partners to create agents, and those agents will span activity for integration in an ERP across a business process, as well as the exchange of data between businesses, which is what we're building agents for on this integration as a platform service. And so we're building these AI agents as an early adopter, and right next to us are companies like Accenture and what was another one? Wipro, some of the largest consultancy organizations you've ever seen. But when we look at the AI garden, as they call it, we're peers. And so you can take your understanding of your business, your understanding of your segment in the market or industry, and use that understanding and that data to destroy power imbalance, to flatten the hierarchy in your industry or in your trading relationships. And then we can actually do some automation. Excuse me. There's lots of things you can automate, but probably the most valuable one for improving operation activities is remediation. That not only do we identify the issue, we start the remediation process. It might be a contact activity. It might be a contact and a change data activity. It might be this connection is not available, so I have to use a second connection. It could be multiple errors that as individual technologists, as individual support people, implementation people, we might not see the whole life cycle of this anomaly or this operational activity. And AI is purpose-built to stitch together that complex quilt that says, here's an opportunity for us to get ahead of the issue and start the remediation process. And so anomaly detection is going to be a great use case, one that many vendors out in the space, from Amazon to Elastic, offer initial model frameworks that you can deploy and use. So do you need AI engineers? That'd be great. Or you can use the AI engineers of some of your vendors that you currently have, like Amazon or Microsoft. AI doesn't just give us the opportunity to better manage production. It can give us the opportunity to improve onboarding and then speed to mapping as well. And this is where it kind of all comes together. You don't get production data until you actually onboard. You don't get valid data or data with integrity unless you've successfully mapped it against the requirements. And so I'm going to start with onboarding. And this is something that we've spent a great deal of time. In fact, some of you know that we have the Simplify product that we acquired last year. But one of the things that we're working on right now is integrating the onboarding process. So if you make a change in that platform, it's fully enabled throughout all of ECGrid and ready to go as soon as you make that change. We've created tools to automate the integration, but also the communication with our customers as it relates to onboarding. And so if you can get people into production quicker, you can get more value out of your EDI implementation. If you can get people onboarded quicker, you create more confidence in your partners and more credibility with your customers. And so onboarding is increasingly almost a low-hanging fruit, kind of like anomaly detection once you get the data. But APIs become a helper with that, and AI can really optimize that over time. But one of the most interesting things we're seeing is one of our partners has built an AI mapping platform. And what that team has done is basically, you get sample data from the client and it creates a high level map for that mapping environment. And if that high level data is already a known data set or compliance specification, you can layer onto that in an AI way business rules for how you pack or ship or how you have to respond. But ultimately, if you get people on board faster, you've got quicker mapping capabilities and quality of mapping, then you have integrity in your data flow from day one. You've got people connected and sending valuable data that won't be rejected at your customer side. And so if we can increase our resiliency or boost it by scaling onboarding and reducing the amount of effort and testing around mapping and integration with APIs, then that gives us an ability to be more agile in the operations. And it gives us an ability to test things. If we go back to that technology hype cycle, not all things will work. Not everything we're going to try is going to be a home run. But so let's think about how we can enable testings and proof of concepts, and especially where some of our businesses are or some of our data sets, maybe proof of concept is the right way to start. But once you get beyond that, you got a resilient multi-technology implementation that's learning from the activity, learning from your production content and interventions that allows you to do something different. Truly take advantage of innovation. This Kranzberg quote is a fun one, and I really like it. Technology is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral. And you've probably heard that technology is both an opportunity and a threat. And it doesn't do that out of malice or excitement or joy. It does that in a very neutral way based on how you deploy it, how you prioritize it, and how you adopt it in your supply chain. So if we create trust, if we look forward beyond just the technology speak of AI and APIs, what I want you to take from this presentation isn't a whole bunch of new acronyms. It's how can you step back and design for a future that drives trust in you as a vendor, trust in you as a business partner. And that can be best done by prioritizing visibility, transparency, proactively challenging your partners to do something different. And let's move beyond just speeds and feeds. Talk about how we can create a tethered relationship that values and benefits both organizations. And that means we have to, in some ways, get a little more balance of power from large organizations or hierarchical structures and build more open systems systems that we encourage people to connect directly to, that provide extended capabilities. Maybe we just offer point-to-point connection for our largest trading partner, but we still want to deploy APIs for everybody else. That's where you could use something like ECGrid or an intermediary. But it's really about creating collaborative networks that sense each other, that understand demand, not, demand from the shopping cart on Shopify to the warehouse in the Midwest, and find a way to create that common language and standardize on content, but also standardize on what's right for your business from a connectivity perspective and for your customers.
Hey, John,
always,
and
yes.
if you don't mind, do you believe that using AI mapping will replace the canonical format to create maps?
So let me repeat it back to you to make sure I heard you right. Do I believe that AI mapping will replace canonical maps? Is that correct? Is that the simple version?
Yep, absolutely.
I would argue that canonical maps are the starting point for AI. That if you don't have a consistent way to describe and define your content, at least on one side of the transaction, it'll be hard to automate it for both sides of the transactions. The good news is many ERP systems do this already with their JSON formats. Good news is we've got a public repository right now with over 500 canonical maps that you build one side once, and the rest is trading partner specific, but also it allows you to add business rules on it. So I think they're steps in a process, and it depends on where you are in your journey, if that makes sense. Your journey for adopting AI is a great question. Any other questions right now?
No, I think you can move along and we can answer the others at the end.
All right, very good. If we're standardizing on content and connections, then we have to make integrity of our information and our processes central to our design. That we have to create content from exception that takes into account, do we have the right metadata? Do we have the right information that as we may encounter downstream issues, we can leverage the power of AI to catch those anomalies earlier, to catch those issues and stop the chaos of firefighting, and perhaps it'll actually have some self-healing capabilities around remediation activities. And so you future-proof through intelligence and modularity. Keep what's working, experiment with small interactions or small test cases or pilots around APIs. And then once you find that those work, then scale it to the next level. And iterate and test and be willing to do things that seem way too out of reality. Because if you don't reach for something that's well beyond your grasp, you probably won't achieve the goal you need to. And effective technology is really about reaching beyond where we are today. And one of my wonderful science fiction quotes from Arthur C. Clarke: any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And I don't know if you've seen some of these AI agents and implementations and LLMs, they seem kind of magical, but it really was a method of putting together a strategy to test, learn, and over time scale that implementation. And so the magic is in the process. The magic is in making sure you have the desire, the passion, and the opportunity to change how you do your implementations, but also experiment with your implementations. And so that's how I'm going to close out the session before we go to APIs. Are there any other questions?
Yes, let me look here. All right, I think you answered this one already. Are you aware of any companies already deploying AI with supply chain technologies?
Yes. And I will mention one because we were acknowledged as their technology partner of the year. Boomi is doing some amazing things today with AI, and we're excited to use that capability to extend our footprint to their customers right now. So that's an exciting one. We have a business partner, Crystal, that has built a very interesting and innovative AI mapper. We have another business partner that has done some amazing things around process and document automation up in Canada. I believe they're now part of Kleinschmidt, but Vaccinating Solution is doing some pretty interesting stuff there. So it kind of depends what domain you're in, but there's lots of innovation happening with AI, and we're excited about our work around anomalies and APIs that will bring to bear by the end of the year. So keep on the lookout for that.
Great. Here's another question. Are we suggesting that we should use EDI X12 and API flat files as well?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know flat files. I mean, JSON is increasingly the kind of common data format or construct, but XML is also part of it. Why would you throw away something that actually works? There's billions of dollars invested in many corporations that are effectively running the supply chains of the world today. Rip and replace for no incremental value is probably not the right place to start. If you want to innovate and try some of these technologies, do it with a new business process. Do it with a newly acquired business partner and experiment and negotiate what that implementation would look like. But hybrid implementations are increasingly the standard. We today are seeing people do API, AS2, and manage file transfer, fully unstructured, untransformable data that has to move securely in an audited way. So yeah, it's about augment and extend versus rip and replace.
Sounds good. I'm already using ECGrid. Can I access your APIs now?
Yeah, great question. So we have a GitHub site of our ECGrid OS platform, and today that has sample scripts or sample API calls for .NET C#. We also have an online form and where you can test and trial these at online. But today you can get your API key by just going into your user profile in the portal, and you can get your API key, do the research on GitHub around ECGrid OS and Loren Data. That's how you can find it if you're searching. And you can start implementing and testing today. If it's nothing other than see what's in your inbox, see if there's any errors, look up an interchange. Great time to test.
All right, here's a fun one. If you could wave a magic wand, what future EDI feature would you most like to see implemented today?
Right, and not just a magic wand. I guess I'd have to come up with a big idea. I think the promise of AI is that we will have less friction in the supply chain. And you can't get there until you have the data. So if I were to wave my magic wand, more people should start investigating and piloting and testing APIs. If you're using Salesforce, they have APIs. If you're using support.com, they have APIs. You don't need to start with APIs and AI and mission critical to learn. You could start with a non-mission critical part of your IT shop. But if you don't start dabbling and learning, you're missing an opportunity. So the magic wand isn't so much about technology. The magic wand is about motivation and execution. I wish everyone would start getting more creative.
That's all the questions we have, Jon.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, John, for sharing all of your expertise and insight. And to everyone on the call, we appreciate your participation. If you have any additional questions or want to chat about how ECGrid can help you reach that next level of advanced integration, whether it be through API or AI, reach out to us anytime, either on our website, ecgrid.com, or by email info@ecgrid.com. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to our monthly newsletter. The link, if it doesn't appear correctly in the chat right now, it will be in the email that you'll receive with the link to the recording of this webinar. But that monthly newsletter includes a whole bunch of the latest and greatest from ECGrid, including the announcement of our next webinar topic coming soon. So we'd love to have you all back next month. Until then, I wish you all a great rest of your day.